Good morning, listeners, and thank you for tuning in to In Her Words Radio. This is your host, Selina Combs. Um, I first want to say thank you to everyone who took the time to tune in to the show last week. The numbers were looking pretty good, and so we thank you all for tuning in. I ask that each and every one of you press the follow button and share, like, and listen, most definitely. So I appreciate you all for tuning in. Today, we're going to talk about me. I I introduced the platform to you guys last week with the hopes that you guys would be open enough to share your experiences, share your trials, share your triumphs. But over the weekend, as I thought about it, I said, how do you get someone to be open enough to share their story? So I concluded that it would take for me to share mine. So that's what I'm going to do today. I'm going to be as open and candid as I possibly can with you guys. I want you to understand what brings me to today. So with that being said, as I said in the last show, Fueling Your Dreams, kind of got the inspiration and the motivation to just keep building myself. And many of you who do know me know that I'm working on my new book that'll be launching this spring. It's called I Am Her, Heir of the Streets. And it's about a story that takes place over in the south side of Chicago. In my mind, I like to consider it Donald Goines and Zane had a baby. So if you've read either of those authors' books, then you kind of know where I'm going with that. So with that being said, after listening to Lisa, I just began digging and trying to find as many resources as I possibly could. I started going on to my local Eventbrite and signing up for writers events, publishing events, others book readings, just to be able to go and get an understanding of what I should do, what I could expect, and excuse me, and just to understand what I could do better. So it just made me feel the need to fuel my dream. And so I just started digging, just really kind of retaining as much information as I possibly can. And I attended this webinar, and the guy was also, saying that basically, you want to put your name out there, you want to put yourself out there, you want to interact with the people, connect with the people. And so one of the ideas that they did offer was to podcast, which is what I'm doing now. And so I thank you all for tuning in and listening and, being that platform and that audience that I need. Again, I can't stress pressing the follow button. Once the station do reach a certain number of followers, statistically, we are able to air on iHeartRadio, which is major. So I would really encourage you all to press the follow button. And also, that's kind of what prompted me to kind of start back writing and just, digging deep into myself and letting my creativity flow and just really kind of putting my energy into my book and preparing to promote the book. And so that's what brings me to you guys today. Prior to this, I was working, typical 9 to 5, and if you know Georgia's traffic, then my commute time was maybe 3 hours a day. And it became to a point to where it's like, I don't know. Even as an entrepreneur for myself, it's like when you think of bigger corporations, you don't think of them, you don't think of it being an entrepreneur somewhere in the upper chain of that business. So, yeah, and when I say that, I say to even say your Target, your Walmart, like that was somebody's idea. Your Barnes and Noble, Starbucks, all of it, that was someone's idea that, and so you don't think about that. And then, I was in a meeting at work and we were talking and they were saying how we could expect for business to slow down, as the season was changing. And it just really dawned on me. And I was just like, this is a hustle, a major franchise, numbers look good. But at the same time, to hear my boss in the meeting stressing the point that business was going to take a turn because it may slow down. And so just really kind of just clicked to me that the energy that I'm putting into his dream, his vision, is the same energy that I could be putting into my own. So um, that was kind of that. And it just kind of gave me that thought process. Um, Again, earlier, if you tuned into the earlier previous broadcast, and you do know that I currently live in Atlanta. Um, Before living in Atlanta, I lived in Minneapolis. I lived in Minneapolis for 17 years. When I first moved to Minnesota, I probably was about 19, 20 years old. Came from Chicago. My family had previously moved to Minneapolis just in hopes for a new change. And so I initially thought that, no, I'm not going there. And I'll be completely honest, I had never even heard of it. So I found myself in Minneapolis, and then I located a salon on a pretty busy avenue there. It's Sean's on Broadway. It was my first salon that I worked at in Minneapolis, and it was a great place to be. It was a salon. It was a family. It was for a young person, new into the industry and new in town. They embraced the fact that I was creative. They embraced the fact that I had a different skill set, and business was good for me there. After I left Sean's, I went to work at a different salon, and I've worked at a few salons. I'm not going to bore you guys with those details, but I've worked at a few salons in Minneapolis and just kind of built that platform as being a stylist there in the city. In addition, I met a guy there. Uh, I'm not going to disclose his name just for the sake of saying, but I met a man there, and I started dating this guy. He was currently in a relationship. Initially, our relationship kind of started off as a business type of situation, and then things got personal. So we kind of started dealing with each other, and it became the most toxic relationship that I've ever been in my life. I don't regret it on today because it's definitely made me the person who I am. But when I look back at myself 20 years ago, I just wonder, like, how did you ever allow someone to have that much control over you? So much control to the point to where it cost me my father's freedom. Uh, my 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 daughter, my daughter's father, we developed such an abusive, just when I say toxic, I mean toxic in every sense of the word. So we developed this relationship, and it his family was against it, my family was against it, and to the point to where things just got so out of hand that my father attempted to take his life, and it cost me my father. Um, Anyone who knows me, like truly knows me and my other family members, the relationship that my father and I have always had, I've always been like, in my mind, I'm convinced that I'm like his sixth sense. I don't have to talk to him to know how he's feeling. I don't have to talk to him to know if he's happy, if he's sad. Like, I can really read his energy. And it cost me that. And it cost me that for a long time. After my father went to prison, he did not speak to me. He didn't speak to me for years. And I wish that I could sit here and tell you guys that at that time that, you know, I left the guy alone and tried my best to, form a relationship back with my father, but that's not what I did. We continued to see each other, and I continued to lose what I valued the most. And so After after my father was released, he still refused to speak with me, and I still found myself torn and just kind of going through life, but missing my best friend. And maybe a few years had went by, and then we finally started speaking again. But it was just so awkward, you know. Again, I just told you I can read his energy, so as awkward as it was for me, it was as awkward for him. But today's a whole different day, you know. So we talk every day. I love him, he loves me, and things are very much different today. But at that point, things were not. Um, I had then decided to take my family and move to California. So I moved out to LA and stayed out there for a few months. LA is not really the place you just kind of pick up and go to, but I'm convinced that there's a part of me that belongs in California. Why, I don't know, but there's always a part of me that's felt like I just belong in California. So, uh, after trying to just kind of survive being out there and alone, and me and my two children, I decided to move back to Minneapolis. And that's just kind of one thing about the city that I will say, that if you can't make it nowhere, you will definitely make it in Minneapolis. There's too many community resources out there for anyone to not be able to have the things that they need and to be able to take care of themselves and their families. So Minnesota is definitely good for that. After we came back from Minnesota, I met my husband. We dated for a year before we got married. At the time when I met him, he was a father of two children. He was the father of two children. During the time of us dating, he became the father of four children. One which I didn't know about, one which he wasn't sure about. Well, it turns out that they both were his. And I found myself stepmother to two newborn babies. The time when we got married, I think the kids were maybe like 5 months. I wish that I could tell you guys that I embraced this situation excitedly and it was just awesome and great. That's not the case. Uh, there were times when we would be out in public, and you know, the black community in Minneapolis is pretty small, so there would be times when we would be out in public and I'll have the kids, and you know, people who knew me, they knew I didn't have a child. They knew they didn't see me pregnant. But not only do I have one baby, I have two babies. So for the sake of saving face, I'll admit that it became embarrassing. It became hard to deal with. It definitely caused tension in the marriage. And my husband and I, we were kind of off and on throughout our relationship, our marriage, not our relationship, throughout our marriage. 2010, December 10th, I got a phone. I'll back up. I kind of found myself frustrated with the situation in its entirety. Just the drama that had taken place over the years. If you can imagine being the wife of a man with four baby mamas, then you can imagine the level of drama and the intensity that comes with that. So, a very energy draining, chaotic time in my life. And I decided I was going to take my kids and we moved to Atlanta. Like I said, just kind of embarking on the beauty products, and I just wanted a fresh start. And so I came to Atlanta and just looking to promote combs and clippers and also to give me and my family a fresh start. We moved here in June of 2010. December 10th, 2010, I got a phone call from my husband's mistress telling me that my husband had got killed.